There comes a time in life when peace is worth more than anything else, more than money, more than possessions, even more than relationships. In old age, your energy is precious, your time invaluable, and the people you surround yourself with can either uplift your spirit or drain it completely. But here's the hard truth. Not everyone deserves a place in your life. Some people take more than they give, burden you with their problems, or make you feel like your best years are behind you. And sometimes the ones who hurt you the most are those you once trusted the most. Yes, even family. You have spent a lifetime working hard, caring for others, and overcoming life's challenges. Now is the time to protect yourself from those who do not respect your kindness, your wisdom, or your peace. It's not selfish, it's survival. In this video, we'll uncover 4 types of people you must avoid in old age to live the peaceful, fulfilling life you deserve. If you find this message meaningful, be sure to subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below. Now, let's get started. The master of manipulation. When love feels like a trap. Margaret sat by the window, watching the golden hues of the late afternoon sun dance across her garden. She should have felt at peace, but instead, her heart was heavy. The phone in her lap buzzed again. Her nephew, Jake. She already knew what the message would say. "Aunt Margaret, I hate to ask, but I'm in a tight spot. Can you help me just this once? I'll pay you back soon." It was never just once. It was never paid back. And it was never really about love. At first, Margaret had been happy to help. She had raised Jake when his mother left, cared for him like a son. But as the years passed, the requests became constant, the gratitude less sincere. The more she gave, the more he expected. And every time she hesitated, he reminded her of all she had done for him in the past, as if that meant she had no right to stop now. She wasn't just a beloved aunt. She was his safety net, his problem solver, his wallet. Manipulation in old age often hides behind the softest words. "You're all I have. After everything we've been through, how could you say no? I thought family was supposed to help each other." It can come from a child, a grandchild, a sibling, even an old friend. Someone who knows your heart, your weaknesses, and exactly which strings to pull. They don't demand, they plead. They don't threaten, they remind. And before you know it, your golden years, which should be filled with peace and self-care, become entangled in someone else's problems. The exhaustion Margaret felt wasn't just from giving too much. It was from the guilt that followed whenever she tried to pull away. Manipulators have a way of making you question yourself, of making you feel that protecting your own well-being is an act of selfishness. They weave a web of obligation so tightly that by the time you realize you're trapped, it feels impossible to escape without causing pain. And so, you stay. You keep answering the phone. You keep saying yes. You keep sacrificing your time, your energy, your peace, because you've been convinced that saying no makes you heartless. But there is nothing cruel about choosing yourself. There is nothing wrong with stepping back from relationships that take but never give. Margaret had spent her life helping others, building a home full of love and support. But what she had failed to do was build boundaries. And without them, love can become a burden, a one-sided contract where only one person benefits. The only way out was to reclaim her voice, to redefine what love and responsibility truly meant. So one evening, when Jake called again, Margaret did something different. Instead of reaching for her checkbook, She took a deep breath and simply said, "I can't help you this time." The silence on the other end was heavy. She braced for anger, for guilt, for the words she had heard 100 times before. But this time, she didn't waver. She didn't justify. She didn't apologize. And in that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: relief. Breaking free from a manipulator doesn't mean cutting someone out of your life completely, though sometimes that is necessary. It means recognizing when a relationship is built on guilt rather than genuine love. It means understanding that true love does not come with conditions, nor should it require endless sacrifice. Setting boundaries doesn't make you unkind. It makes you strong. And the people who truly care about you will respect those boundaries, while those who only wanted to take will reveal themselves in their anger. Margaret had spent a lifetime being someone's rock, but now, in the years meant for rest, she realized something important. She was never meant to carry the whole world on her shoulders. The weight was never hers to bear alone. And as she sat by her window once more, sipping her evening tea, she felt lighter, freer, finally at peace, because for the first time in a long time, she had chosen herself. And that was enough. The endless takers. When kindness becomes a burden. James had always prided himself on being a generous man. A father, a grandfather, a trusted friend. He had spent his life providing for others, never hesitating when someone needed help. If a family member was short on rent, he stepped in. If a friend needed a ride to the doctor, he cleared his schedule. If his adult daughter was struggling, he offered his home, his money, his time. Helping others had always been a source of joy, a way to express love. But somewhere along the way, that joy had turned into exhaustion. The phone calls never stopped. His grandson needed money for a car payment. His neighbor needed help moving furniture. His old friend from work, whom he hadn't seen in years, suddenly remembered him when she needed a favor. At first he had convinced himself that this was what family and friendship were all about, being there for others, offering support. But then he started to notice something. They never called just to check in. They never asked how he was doing. They never offered anything in return, not even a genuine thank you. Every interaction was a transaction, and James was always the one paying. The endless takers in life are often not malicious. Many don't even realize they are doing it. They have simply become accustomed to the generosity of others, believing that help will always be there, that kindness is endless, that their needs will always be met without question. Some take because they assume they are entitled to it. Others take because they have never had to stand on their own. And then there are those who take because they do not understand how to give. But no matter the reason, the result is the same. One person constantly giving, while the other only receives. At first, it doesn't seem like a problem. Giving feels good, and generosity is a virtue. But over time, the weight of always saying yes becomes unbearable. There is an unspoken cost to being the dependable one. It's the silent frustration that creeps in when another request comes in before you've even had a moment to rest. It's the resentment that builds when you realize the kindness you've extended has become an expectation rather than a gift. It's the loneliness that settles in when you recognize that your value in certain relationships is only tied to what you can provide. James didn't want to become bitter. He didn't want to stop helping the people he loved. But he also didn't want to spend his remaining years feeling used, taken for granted, and emotionally depleted. He had given so much of himself. But who was giving to him? who was looking out for his well-being. The realization was painful, but it was also necessary. His kindness had become a burden, and it was time to take back control. Reclaiming balance in these relationships wasn't about shutting people out. It was about redefining the role he played in them. He started by practicing the hardest word in the English language for a giver: no. Not every request had to be met with a yes. Not every problem was his to solve. He learned that it was okay to let others figure things out on their own, that his love was not measured by how much he gave, but by the wisdom he shared and the boundaries he upheld. When his grandson called again, asking for another loan, James didn't immediately reach for his checkbook. Instead, he said, "I love you, and I know you'll figure this out. I can't help this time." There was silence on the other end, disbelief, maybe even frustration. But James didn't feel guilt. He felt something else: relief. He began to set small but firm boundaries. If a friend only called when they needed something, he limited those conversations. If a family member never reciprocated his generosity, he adjusted how much he gave. He surrounded himself with people who valued him not for what he could do, but for who he was. And for the first time in a long time, he felt lighter. Kindness should never feel like a debt you owe the world. Generosity should be given freely, not extracted. And love, true love, is not measured by how much of yourself you sacrifice, but by the joy, respect, and balance that exists in the relationships you choose to keep. James had spent a lifetime giving. Now, it was time for him to receive, not just from others, but from himself. And that, he realized, was the greatest gift of all. The Critic in Disguise: How Constant Negativity Erodes Your Happiness. Helen sat at the kitchen table, a warm glow of pride on her face as she flipped through a photo album. Her latest painting, a delicate watercolor of a quiet autumn morning, was nestled between the pages. It had been years since she picked up a brush, but after finally enrolling in an art class at the community center, she had rediscovered a love she had long forgotten. Excited, she called her sister, eager to share the news. "I finally did it," Helen said, her voice filled with the enthusiasm of a child showing off a prized possession. "I signed up for that painting class, and I just finished my first piece. I'm so proud of it." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a familiar sigh. "Well, that's nice, I guess," her sister said. "But at your age, shouldn't you be spending your time on something more practical? I mean, what's the point of starting something new now?" The excitement drained from Helen's face. Her fingers traced the edges of her painting as doubt crept in. Maybe her sister was right. Maybe it was silly to take up something new in her 70s. Maybe she should focus on more practical things. The moment that had once felt joyful was now tainted with self-doubt, and all it took was a few careless words. Critics come in many forms. They can be family, friends, or even acquaintances. People who disguise their judgment as concern, their negativity as just being honest. They rarely see themselves as cruel. In fact, many believe they are helping, offering advice, or guiding you toward a better choice. But what they fail to realize is that constant criticism, no matter how well intended, can erode a person's confidence and joy over time. Some critics focus on the past, reminding you of every mistake you've made. Others predict the future, warning you that your choices will lead to failure. And then there are those who judge the present, questioning your hobbies, your lifestyle, even your happiness. They may not be outright malicious, but their words plant seeds of doubt that slowly take root. Instead of celebrating your accomplishments, they highlight your flaws. Instead of encouraging your growth, they make you question whether you should have tried in the first place. As people age, these voices become even more dangerous. The later years of life should be a time of self-discovery, peace, and fulfillment. A chance to embrace passions, build meaningful relationships, and live without fear of judgment. But critics have a way of making you feel like your best years are behind you, that you should act your age, that dreaming, exploring, and trying new things are privileges reserved for the young. The truth is, no one, at any age, should have to carry the weight of someone else's negativity. Limiting time with constant critics is not an act of avoidance. It is an act of self-preservation. The company you keep shapes your mindset, and surrounding yourself with people who uplift you rather than tear you down is essential for emotional well-being. But what happens when the critic is someone you can't easily avoid? A sibling, a spouse, a close friend? The key is learning to filter their words without allowing them to define you. When a critic offers unsolicited advice or dismisses your choices, pause before responding. Ask yourself, is this opinion based on love and encouragement, or is it rooted in their own fears and limitations? If the answer is the latter, let it go. Their negativity is a reflection of them, not you. One of the most powerful ways to handle a critic is to set boundaries. If someone constantly dismisses your interests, make it clear that you do not need their approval. "I appreciate your thoughts, but I'm happy with my choices," is a simple yet firm way to close the conversation. If they continue, redirect the discussion to something neutral, or limit how much time you spend engaging with them. Helen eventually learned this lesson. The next time she spoke with her sister and the criticisms came, she didn't shrink back in doubt. Instead, she smiled and said, "I'm doing this for me, and I love it." And that was the end of the conversation. Critics will always exist, but their power over you is only as strong as you allow it to be. Happiness is not something that needs validation from others. It is something you create for yourself. And the moment you stop seeking approval from those who will never give it, you free yourself to live on your own terms, unapologetically and with joy. The ungrateful soul, when love goes unrecognized. Eleanor had always been the kind of woman who gave with her whole heart. As a mother, she had sacrificed for her children, working long hours and putting her own dreams on hold so they could have a better future. As a friend, she had been the one people called when they needed support. A ride to the doctor, a shoulder to cry on, a favor they never hesitated to ask. And as a grandmother, she poured herself into every holiday, every birthday, every small moment, ensuring her family always felt cared for. But as the years passed, she began to notice something unsettling. The phone calls from her children were growing less frequent, unless they needed something. The grandkids rarely stopped by unless there was a present waiting for them. No one seemed to notice the effort she put into their lives, the love she wove into every meal she cooked, every sacrifice she made. She had given them everything, yet somehow she had become invisible. One afternoon she stood in her kitchen, preparing her famous homemade casserole for a family gathering. She had spent hours perfecting the dish, just as she had done for years, hoping it would bring a sense of warmth and nostalgia to those she loved. But when dinner was served, her son barely acknowledged her, too busy scrolling through his phone. Her granddaughter pushed the plate away, muttering that she preferred takeout. And her daughter, her own flesh and blood, didn't even say thank you before heading out the door, taking leftovers without a second glance. Eleanor sat at the table long after everyone had left, staring at the half-eaten plates. Her hands, once strong and steady, now trembled slightly as she gripped her napkin. She had done everything right. She had loved them without conditions. And yet, she felt like she had given her heart to people who saw her efforts as nothing more than a habit, an expectation, something they were entitled to, rather than something to be cherished. There is a particular kind of sorrow that comes with realizing the people you have spent a lifetime caring for no longer recognize the depth of your love. Ingratitude is not just an absence of appreciation. It is a wound, a quiet betrayal that makes you question whether all the years of giving were worth it. And in old age, when time is more precious than ever, continuing to pour energy into people who do not value you is not just exhausting. It is devastating. Ungrateful people often do not realize the impact of their actions. Some have grown so used to receiving that they forget to acknowledge the giver. Others believe that love should come without the need for gratitude, mistaking selflessness for obligation. And then there are those who take because they simply do not know how to give in return. Regardless of the reason, the effect remains the same: depletion, disappointment, and a quiet, aching loneliness that lingers long after they are gone. But the greatest tragedy is not their ingratitude. It is allowing it to change you. Too many people, like Eleanor, continue to give, hoping that one day the people they love will wake up and see their worth. But love, when given to those who do not appreciate it, does not grow. It withers. And if you are not careful, it can make you bitter, turning your once generous heart into one that is closed, hardened by too many thankless acts. The truth is, you cannot force someone to appreciate you. You cannot make them see your value if they refuse to look. But what you can do is choose where to place your love. Eleanor eventually learned this lesson, though it took time. One evening, instead of preparing a meal for people who barely noticed, she accepted an invitation from a neighbor who had always appreciated her company. Instead of waiting for a phone call that never came, she joined a local group at the community center, where she met others who shared her interests and actually listened when she spoke. She began shifting her energy away from those who drained her and toward those who truly valued her presence. She stopped overextending herself for people who took her for granted and started pouring her kindness into those who gave it back, even in the smallest ways. A warm smile, a simple thank you, a conversation where she finally felt heard. And in doing so, she found something she had been missing for years: joy. Love is not measured by how much you give, but by how it is received. It is not your responsibility to keep filling the cups of those who never think to refill yours. You are allowed to step back. You are allowed to say no, and most importantly, you are allowed to give your love to those who truly see you, not just for what you do, but for who you are. Eleanor still cooks, but now it's for friends who cherish every bite. She still gives, but only to those who understand that love should never be taken for granted. And when she looks around her dinner table now, she no longer sees faces lost in distraction. She sees people who appreciate her presence, and that, she realizes, is more than enough. Choosing peace over toxicity. Life is too short, and in your later years, every moment is precious. You've spent decades giving, loving, and building relationships. But now, it's time to choose yourself. Setting boundaries isn't about shutting people out. It's about making space for those who genuinely respect and appreciate you. It's about protecting your peace, your time, and your well-being from those who drain rather than uplift. Avoiding manipulators, endless takers, harsh critics, and ungrateful souls isn't an act of selfishness. It's an act of self-preservation. You deserve to spend your golden years surrounded by people who bring joy, who listen, who reciprocate kindness, and who celebrate the person you've become. Let today be the day you stop apologizing for prioritizing yourself. Let today be the day you reclaim your peace. If this message resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you encountered these types of people in your life? How have you protected your energy? And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more insights on living fully, freely, and on your own terms. Thank you for watching. And remember, your happiness is your responsibility, and your peace is your greatest gift.